Okay, so I think it's safe to say that Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz will be an absolute war this weekend, 100%. This one's going down in boxing this time. Masvidal's currently one up in MMA, but, I think in that fight, people wanted to see it go on a bit longer, to be fair. Ended by a doctor's stoppage at the end of round 3. What's going to happen here, though, it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's going to be a real good competitive fight, in my opinion, where I think it could be a fight of two halves, where Masvidal's going to be starting off the better out of the two, getting his success earlier on. But as we know, Nate Diaz is going to come into it more late, and you never know, he could possibly catch the eye of the judges. But it's going to be interesting. Obviously, Jorge Masvidal's last boxing fight was back in 2005, which he won. But yeah, he hasn't done just pure boxing since 2005, which is 19 years ago. Nate Diaz fought in boxing more recently against Jake Paul back in August. So, with that kind of stat that we got there, I mean, Diaz is the more fresh guy in boxing now. But overall, though, Masvidal's more of a boxer than what Nate Diaz is, though. It's clear from their MMA fights that they've had. And in the fight that Masvidal and Nate Diaz had, Masvidal was getting the better of the majority of the exchanges, if we're being honest. He was. I think Masvidal's strikings, I know it's much more technical, let's put it that way. Masvidal's striking's a lot more technical than what Nate Diaz is. And I think Masvidal picks his shots really quite well, to be fair. Masvidal, shows some good footwork as well. Nate Diaz just likes to, put the pressure on you, come at you, and just have an absolute war. Nate Diaz is quite scrappy with his punches, to be fair. Can come in a bit recklessly. But when the guy starts landing, though, he's going to be able to hurt you. And, Diaz will be able to get in there up close and get success 100%. Masvidal can keep a good distance well and, time his shots well from a good distance, but he's not like he's not like a normal boxer who's going to be able to, really keep someone like Nate Diaz at range and punish him for how scrappy he is. That's not Masvidal. Masvidal's an MMA fighter as well. So, it's going to be interesting. Masvidal is going to be getting some good success from a good range, but Nate Diaz is going to be able to get in there as well and do some work on Masvidal. And, I'm not sure if Masvidal is really going to be able to set up big shots to get Nate Diaz out of there, in my opinion, because Nate Diaz has got an extremely great chin, as we all know. And, Masvidal, I don't think he's going to be able to keep someone like Nate Diaz at bay because, he's not because he's not a boxer who has great, range management and stuff like that, who's going to be able to keep you at range, punish you with the jab, and, just keep his shots long. Masvidal, I feel like, could be forced into quite a bit of a scrap here against Nate Diaz, and that's going to go into Nate Diaz's favor. But I think Masvidal's the more good technical boxer here, in my opinion. He's got the footwork and he does set up his shots well. But eventually, Nate Diaz will be able to get his way and it will be more of a war. And, Masvidal will be able to compete in that. But if Nate Diaz can get up close, get his work done, that's what he's going to be doing. Because Nate Diaz, I feel like he's going to be trying to wear Masvidal up against the ropes and get some good shots in. And that's what's going to happen. Nate Diaz will eventually be able to, shut that range down and get good success. But it depends how long Masvidal can keep his rhythm going for. And that's going to be interesting to see. That will be interesting to see. I think this fight will definitely go the distance. And, it's 10 rounds as well. Like, Masvidal's going to start well, in my opinion. Definitely. And do I think he'll have Nate Diaz in real trouble? No, but I feel like he'll be able to get the better of the exchanges earlier on in the fight. And, it'll be interesting to see if Masvidal's momentum eventually stops, and I think it will do. Diaz will eventually get to him and land big shots, in my opinion. Land shots up close, be able to rough Masvidal up a bit as well, in my opinion. But I think the Jake Paul fight probably has helped Nate Diaz coming into this one as well. I do think it's helped Nate Diaz. Obviously, you know, he knows his way around the boxing ring more now, and he's more used to that than what Jorge Masvidal is after, you know, Masvidal hasn't boxed for 19 years. But obviously, you know, Masvidal, he's recently retired from MMA. I think it was in, last year, 2023 in April. So, you know, Masvidal's been out of combat sports for over a year now. So again, though, could Masvidal come into this a bit more rusty? But again, no, he's going to have been focusing purely on boxing, and that's going to be interesting to see. But as well, though, I don't know. Like, I kind of want to say Masvidal to win, but again, though, I do see Nate Diaz being able to come on strong. And as I said, I think that Jake Paul fight would have benefited Nate Diaz quite a bit. And Nate Diaz will be able to shut that range down. But I think Masvidal has a much better shot selection than what Nate Diaz does, though. Nate Diaz can come in quite wild and quite scrappy. And, you know, that could do him good in this fight against someone like Masvidal. Like, obviously, against, like, a real boxer, he wouldn't be able to get away with any of that whatsoever. He'd be out of there and around against a real boxer. But, you know, against someone like Masvidal, he's going to be able to get away with, you know, being scrappy. Against someone like Jake Paul, you're going to get away with being scrappy like that. And, you know, you're going to be able to get some good success against those kind of guys. And I do think Nate Diaz will be able to get a lot of success with his scrappiness in this fight as well, in my opinion. And obviously, you know, Nate Diaz is such a tough guy. I don't see Masvidal being able to get Nate Diaz out of there unless he cuts Diaz wide open. But I don't see that happening in these gloves, to be fair. And let's be real, Nate Diaz didn't exactly he didn't really show any signs of severe bleeding in that fight against Jake Paul at all, really. So I wouldn't really say it's much to worry about here. And I do think, let's be real, Jake Paul probably does hit harder than Jorge Masvidal. So I don't see Nate Diaz being stopped here. Do I see Jorge Masvidal possibly being stopped by Nate Diaz? No, but he can be putting good. I think Nate Diaz can hurt Masvidal and put him in some big trouble here, though, in my opinion. And I do think Masvidal can hurt Diaz, but I don't think I see Nate Diaz being able to put Masvidal in a bit of trouble late. I feel like Masvidal's going to gas a bit, and Nate Diaz is still going to, you know, fully be in it in those later rounds. And that's when I see Masvidal possibly being in a bit of trouble. I don't see him getting stopped, though. I think it does go the distance. Could we see any knockdowns in this? That's interesting to see. I reckon both guys get a knockdown. That's what I'm going to say as well. I think Masvidal gets a knockdown probably round 3 or something like that. Nate Diaz will come back into it, get a knockdown round 7 or 8 or something like that. And that's going to be interesting to see. I think we're in for a real war here in a really close fight, where it's really, really, really difficult to pick a winner. I know. I've been thinking Masvidal, but I think there are definitely ways Nate Diaz pulls this off, though. I think 10 rounds definitely really benefits Nate Diaz, and it showed when he fought Jake Paul that 10 rounds was fairly beneficial to help Nate Diaz. And he was able to get Jake Paul in a bit of trouble in that fight as well. He really was. But I know. I think Masvidal is going to be able to work the body a bit here against Diaz, and Diaz doesn't really work the body. That's the big thing as well. And Masvidal's more technical with his shots, so you never know. I don't know. It's a difficult one because, you know, Diaz can close that gap down well against someone like Masvidal. He was able to close that gap down against Masvidal in their MMA fight, got some success. Obviously, you know, they're two completely different sports, but, you know, they're two MMA guys, and, you know, in the boxing exchanges, Diaz was able to get up close and land some good shots on Masvidal. But, I mean, to be fair, the majority of the time Masvidal was doing well at range, but Diaz was able to close that gap down. And I think as the fight goes longer, Diaz will be able to close that gap down and get more success here in this boxing fight, as it's 10 rounds. So it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of on the fence for this one. I'm not going to lie. I've been thinking Masvidal, but I think Diaz can actually win it. That's the thing. But it's going to be really competitive, really close. Can't wait. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, King. I'll speak to you in a bit. Thanks for watching. Peace out.